Our next session is on what is an ideal advisor. And to take the session, we have somebody who's traveled from street to Subaru, from credit cards to credit funds, from MNC private banker to an Indian AMC CEO. Transformative is the best way to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Vishal Kapoor. Having doors slammed on your face doing sales call teaches you a lot. Vishal's first part-time job as a salesman while still in college taught him a lot about selling, managing objections, refining a pitch, and persistence. His skills were enhanced and expanded at IIM Ahmedabad. Thus began a journey from Ivy League to the big league. What transpired was a corporate journey through ITC, Threadneedle, MX, Standard Chartered, and finally crossing over from distribution to manufacturing, leading IDFC Mutual Fund. His gentle, manly demeanor, simplicity of approach combined with razor-sharp thought may be attributed to his regular meditation routine. A marathon runner, he embodies the spirit of thinking long-term, a true combination of thinker and a doer. Vishal loves to travel and experience landmark of history and architectural beauty and experiment with local street food. A towering personality himself, he prefers reflective retreats in the mountains. His idea of unwinding is spending time with family and friends. To share with us his insights gleaned from a long career in sales, distribution, and leadership, let us welcome Mr. Vishal Kapoor, the ideal CEO, to give his view on the ideal advisor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, when Prem called me to take on this topic, the ideal advisor, I had to ask him 3 times, why me? Because I'm hardly ideal.
So many of us here.
But what I did think I would do is, having worked with many advisors over almost 18 years of my career as an advisor or some form of distribution, advice, private banking, etc., I can only offer to share some of the learnings that I've had through these years, as well as some of my own reflections, my feelings, disappointments, as well as some of the highs. So to start with, what makes an ideal advisor? I started this journey quite early. I was very lucky. And as an advisor, I visualized myself as someone who was always looking out for the customer, doing the right thing, stepping into customer's shoes, planning for him, helping the customer become very, very successful financially. In some ways, I saw myself as an angel, helping out people, making them successful. But the environment was beginning to tell me something else. The environment was saying that actually not everything that we might be doing is right. And you can imagine, many of you may not have been in banks, but you know, if there was a pyramid, that would be absolutely at the bottom. Was I really an angel or was I someone else? And you have to appreciate that at times like this, you start feeling like the demon, Ravan, really the embodiment of evil. What were we doing so wrong? But many years in sales teaches you something, and one of the things it teaches you is that always look at the bright side. And even when we look at someone like Ravan, we have to appreciate he was a very capable ruler. He was very knowledgeable. He was a scientist, philosopher. He's a great astrologer. And to be honest, every individual has a mix. It's a full package. And we can make a choice. The choice could be look at the positive side. And certainly, one of the advantages of being the Ravan for me was I would have 10 heads. And with these heads, I would hopefully be able to try and assemble a lot of the qualities, the skills that a successful advisor really needs. What are those skills? It's very difficult to actually narrow it down to a few. And on the screen, what I'm sharing is just a few of them. Now 15 minutes is too short a time, as you'll all appreciate, for sharing so many or talking about so many skills that an ideal advisor really needs. So what I'll try and do over the next 10 minutes or so is actually leave you with something that may be more memorable or more easy for you to relate to in the acronym of IDEAL. So let's start with the I. A great classical singer actually said that sometimes we must keep a promise that we never made. When you think of our Jawans out on the border, think about the feeling of someone in Siachen in minus 60 degrees Celsius protecting our borders. What would be his sense of purpose and duty? What would he be going through being out there in the cold in the wilderness with not a spot of any attention or spotlight on him, so that all of us can feel safe? And in some ways, I think an advisor must do that, which is have the trust that we have in our Jawans, that advisor is always going to be looking out for me, just as the Jawan does on the border. So integrity of what we do is in many ways the first quality or the first skill that every advisor must have. We manage or are responsible for our customers' hard-earned savings. And it's very difficult to be successful if there is any sign of a breakdown of trust. Even if the trust doesn't really break down, even a sign is not good enough. So a successful advisor must not only be doing the right thing when people are watching, but also the right thing when no one is. So integrity, I will leave you as the first thought that you must take away as the core of our business. Moving on, the D. As any successful athlete will tell you, a flash in the pan performance is possible, but repeating it is what is very, very difficult. Consistency is what drives performance over a long period of time. All of us have many tasks, and several times we have the choice, like the choice we have in the morning alarm clock goes off. We can either snooze it, we can shut it off and go back to sleep because it's been a very tiring day and for once let's make an exception. Or we can have the discipline to get up every time and do what is required. A successful advisor will need that consistency, that rhythm, that discipline to be able to do what would otherwise be sometimes a very boring chore, but do it repeatedly. So the second quality I would want to emphasize is the need for discipline in advice. Discipline not just to be able to separate out the wheat from the chaff in terms of the market or the advice you're giving. The discipline not often to actually have the indifference to what is going on emotionally for the customer, but to be able to step back and take a hard look at some of the numbers. The discipline also to be consistent in what was promised and how one is managing someone's portfolio. Let's move to the third aspect, which is E. The iconic Steve Jobs has expressed this very well. Sometimes the customer may not realize what they need. And it's not about getting ahead of yourself, it's about knowing the customer so intimately that you can almost predict what is coming. So really, can the advisor be almost like the autocorrect for many of us, that you know intuitively what the word is that the client is looking for, is the question. Now, starting off as a young advisor, it was very difficult, I must confess, to try and get into what I would think would be very, very big shoes. How do I actually relate to a customer who's maybe got 30 years of additional experience than I have, who's incredibly more successful, both financially as well as in many other aspects than I am, and yet be expected to advise the person? But the fact is that once you start stepping into someone's shoes and seeing the world from their point of view, it is possible to then look at the various angles, the various shades where your knowledge, your skill, your ability to look at the full picture can still be able to add value. So one successful trait of an ideal advisor, I would therefore suggest, is empathy. This is not just a game of hard numbers. It is equally, if not more importantly, a game of understanding emotions and being able to relate and therefore add value to a customer. So a successful advisor will need to be sensitive not just to the very objective, very hard numbers in terms of objectives, but also the life stage, the life cycle, as well as the lifestyle that the customer has, as well as, of course, the eventual goal that we are all trying to achieve for our client. Moving on, Aristotle once said that all communication must lead to change. Something must happen out of a communication. I must tell you about a call I once made, a sales call, a sales pitch, and I felt very, very excited about it because I thought that it was a wonderful call. He was a new client and I had a great new product which I was pitching. And I told the client about the portfolio, the concentration limits. I took him through the beta of the portfolio. I took about the alpha. It was a fantastic track record. I showed him the Sharpe ratio, the Trainer ratio, the Sortino. I showed him the R squared. And I came back really, really very happy, saying, look, this is something I've really cracked today. And as salespeople do and learn, you come back and you follow up with your client, and one day later, I sent him a mail saying, look, we had a meeting. What do you think? When do you want me to come across with the forms for you to sign? And he sent me an interesting email. It says, next time, try and explain the product in a language I can understand. Regards. So articulating what we are trying to say is extremely important, and we must understand and we must appreciate that our language is often so complex for the end customer that the message is lost. And it's so critical for us that the entire message, the full picture is understood by the customer, not just the bright spots or the promise of an expected return. Don't we make that mistake very often where we glide over some of the risk issues or the uncomfortable issues? But that is, to my mind, a very key aspect of successful advisors. They find the right articulation, the right ways, without unnecessarily scaring someone, to give the full picture. Now, the art and the science of articulation has taken many leaps, and many new studies are allowing us to get better and better at this articulation. So, as an ideal advisor, it becomes very, very important for us to embrace this science and embrace this art and get better at our articulation of our products and services. And that gets me to the last point that I want to leave you behind with. Alvin Toffler, the great futurist, said that to succeed, it is not about just learning but also unlearning and relearning. Many of us took a driving test many years back, and as a driving test, we are given a learner sticker which we have to put for 3 months or 6 months, and then we take it off because now we have a license. The successful advisor doesn't take the learner's tag off. They keep it with them. Because advice is about learning all the time. It is about constant evolution. It is about relearning. It is about finding out what's happening every day, not just in the markets, but also about the environment, the state of how the skills around us can be enhanced. So the fifth quality that I find that differentiates successful advisors from the average is that successful advisors are constant learners. That leads me to a quote which I still find very, very relevant, even though it's 2000 years old. And it relates to medicine. Like a doctor, Hippocrates says that you can cure sometimes, you can treat often, but you must comfort always. We can sometimes get the portfolio objectives right and get the returns which the client wanted. We must be able to construct portfolios which are often or most often correct for the client. But the very important aspect of managing the relationship with the client in advice is to always be there when it matters in terms of comforting the client, to handhold, especially in times of volatility. So to summarize in conclusion, while there are many qualities of an ideal advisor, learning from observing many of them, many of you, over many meetings, many calls, many interactions, I've come to the conclusion that the integrity of what we are doing, always be there, always being there, being trustworthy, the discipline of repeatedly doing what we set out to do, the empathy of seeing the picture from the client's shoes, the articulation that gives the full picture to the customer, and always being a learner is what makes the advisor move from being a villain to a hero. In my mind today, there is no doubt you are the Nayaks of this industry, you are the heroes of the industry as an advisor. And I would call upon all of you to acknowledge your role in this profession by giving yourself a big round of applause, please. I am continuing to learn from you, and thank you very much for your time and attention today.